A warm welcome to the March episode of the Uxbridge FM podcast. Lots coming up this month. There's comedy news, Harefield Hospital news, poems about Lent, the Iver Environment Centre, and some worries about the Colne Valley. First off though, we're finding out about the U3A. Rodney Fox has popped in, and you are communications and PR for the Hillingdon U3A. Hi, Rodney.
Good morning to you.
Now, first of all, what is the U3A?
Well, the U3A is a self-help organisation for people no longer in full-time employment. And we provide a mixture of educational, creative and leisure opportunities in a friendly environment for those who can match that very wide criterion.
And the Hillingdon one, you meet at the Winston Churchill Hall for your main meetings?
Our main monthly meeting is at the Winston Churchill Hall, which we have met there for a number of years.
And you've got 850 members in Hillingdon, which is quite a few, isn't it? And it's 21 years old this year.
Well, that's right. We are one of 40 U3As in London. We have sister organisations in Northwood and Harrow and Ealing and right across the capital.
And a bit of history, perhaps, of the U3A. You were mentioning it started in France.
Yes, and it was originally called the University of the Third Age, and it was a use of the French universities to allow seniors in there to attend and learn things. When the model moved over to the UK and eventually out to Australia and South Africa and a variety of other Commonwealth countries, the focus was more on an independent organisation in each location, performing as an independent role within an umbrella organisation called the Third Age Trust.
And there's all kinds of interest groups, aren't there, amongst the membership? So you have members that have interest in all kinds of things.
Well, that's right. We are, by the way, self-funded and entirely volunteer-driven. So the people who lead these learning interest groups are themselves members of the U3A. And typically, in our case, we have about 80 interest groups, and they range right across a mixture of learning, of languages, of a variety of sorts of history like family, social, local history and so on, art, variety of different things related to creative work.
Yeah. Computer, I guess, there'll be some
We have a computer
stuff.
group, which is very popular, especially bearing in mind as people move into their senior age that they have less experience on computing perhaps, but we are finding newer, younger members coming in are much more savvy. And so now we're seeing a traditional face-to-face organisation, both in terms of its monthly meetings and its interest group meetings, is now taking into account the use of technology so that those who can't get in very easily, or perhaps those who live a distance away or don't want to travel in the winter, can perhaps also use virtual means of participating in those learning groups. We tend to use people's houses if it's a small interest group, and local church halls if they are larger groups, or village halls. So, for instance, in Ickenham, we use the Ickenham Village Hall. We have a Scottish country dancing group meets there. We use the United Reformed Church there, and I run a group on linguistics that happens to meet there, as does about 8 or 9 other groups that use that facility. And by using those facilities, it means we can keep our costs very low, so that a typical annual fee for Hillingdon U3A is £20 per annum.
That is very good value, £20 a year. And that covers everything. I suppose if the groups and things go out for trips, it wouldn't cover that.
No, it doesn't cover that, obviously. And if you have a coffee, then you pay for your coffee.
Yeah.
But it covers you the ability to join any of the interest groups that there are around and participate in the events that they have.
So it's aimed at people who are no longer working full-time, but what's the age criteria?
Well, it's interesting you raise that because there is no age criteria. I looked again at the principles of the U3A movement, and quite clearly the only thing is that we look for people no longer in full-time employment, because we meet during the week in the weekdays, and it would sort of exclude them from participating. But in this day and age, not only do we have retired people joining, but also those perhaps who are facing the realities of life currently, perhaps don't have all of their time taken up and would like to do this alongside working in their part-time in their employer's organisation or as a consultant.
You've been involved for how long in the U3A?
I joined the U3A when I retired in 2002, I think it was. I had an interest in family history. And so I joined the local one, which met at that stage in the Odeon in Uxbridge, was where they had the monthly meetings. Eventually that became too expensive for us to do that, so we moved out to the Winston Churchill Hall over time. I'm a member of the committee. I participate in the family history group. I also run a group which is focused on linguistics, as I mentioned before. So I'm both, if you like, a teacher and a learner, I suppose.
I'm sure it's very much a social organisation, isn't it? You meet new friends and interesting people.
Well, that's especially the case as we move through life. Things happen such as bereavement and so on, and a lot of people are lonely. It's probably one of the biggest problems that there are for people as they move through life. And of course, we are a social organisation. Learning is done in a social environment. It's face-to-face is the traditional way in which we've worked. And so you can get to meet new friends. And in this case, you could perhaps have 850 new friends if you joined our U3A.
Yes. And how do members get to know what's going on?
Well, that's through a newsletter. The website has information on it. Also, the monthly meetings. We still hold the monthly meetings, by the way. We just do them virtually at the moment. And about 150 of our members typically will come in virtually and participate in that. And that runs a similar way that it does when it's face-to-face, except you do miss the face-to-face element. And that's we will return to as soon as we can gain access again to the Winston Churchill Hall.
Yeah.
A number of our groups, of course, during COVID also went virtual, but we've now seen a return to face-to-face meetings, which is really what most of our members want to experience. Though many of the smaller meetings, it's more of an intimate gathering with friends it's become as people have been there. So if you're playing Rummy Cub or Mahjong or Bridge or any of those, it's people you want to see because you play with them and against them on a regular basis. And that enables you to do that and spread the number of friends you've got.
That sounds great. There's a website, isn't there, as well, for more information?
Yes, u3asites.org.uk/Hillingdon. Our membership secretary in our brochure has a telephone number in there, 07532 268 002. And that will enable you to ask any questions, receive an application form and so on. You can pick up our brochures at most libraries. We do distribute them regularly into the libraries.
Well, thanks, Rodney, for coming in and telling us all about the U3A, and hopefully you'll have some more people join and take part in that wide range of activities.
Lovely.
It's Comedy Club news next. The fabulous local comedy club, the Comedy Bunker, is changing hands. Let's find out more about that. So Phil Smith joins us now, promoter at the Comedy Bunker at Uxbridge Golf Club. Now, Phil, I gather you have news that you're handing over the reins of the Comedy Bunker and setting the club off on another chapter in its life.
Yes, I certainly am. It's quite hard to believe, but 11 years after taking it over from Joel Sanders, yes, it's finally time to, as you say, set it free to someone new.
And was Joel the guy that set it up originally, or was there history before him, do you know?
No, you're right. Joel did set it up in 1996. He started actually a club at the Clay Pigeon in Eastcote first, I think it was called Catch the Pigeon. And then that morphed into the Comedy Bunker when he took it to a golf club, hence the name Bunker. And then, so in 2011, he decided he wanted to move on, and I took over. When I first took over, obviously, I'd just come out of the ambulance service, London Ambulance Service. What did I know about running comedy clubs? But all I knew is I was very keen to learn and try and do my best, and I had a few ideas that I thought might work. And those first few months, I had audiences of like 20 to 25 people. So obviously I gradually built to the empire it is now.
And you've had some quite big names, haven't you, considering it's quite a local club? Remind us of who you've had in the last 10 years or so.
Goodness me. So Jack Whitehall's been along, done a couple of warm-up gigs before one of his national tours. Harry Hill comes along regularly, as does Omid Jalili and Andy Parsons. We are fortunate enough, and sad to say, we did actually host the last performance that Barry Cryer did.
Oh yes,
yeah, he did that in December, and that was his last live gig. I made a lot of new contacts, a lot of new friends. I think the act's word got out that it was quite a nice place to gig if you're a comedian. We think we treat people right there. All the acts, we look after them. And the audience is always lovely. So that always helps inspire acts to come back and do what they do. But Sian will know lots of new people. She'll make new friends and she'll have fresh ideas. She'll have new input. So it'd be good to get some fresh ideas on board and just keep the club evolving.
Yeah, so Sian's taking it over. So Sian is a local person who is a comedian herself and has run comedy clubs. So her gig starts when?
My final gig is on the 26th of March. And that is with Hal Cruttenden. He's going to be headlining. There's a month break, and Sian, I can't remember the first date of her show, but it's going to be in April, and that's when she takes over.
Thanks, Phil. 11 years of comedy history in Uxbridge.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Cheers, Phil. Take care.
No problem, Steve. You're welcome, and you.
And let's talk to Sian Doughty, who's taking over the running of the Comedy Bunker. Give us an idea of what we can expect when you take over the club. And you're not comparing, you won't be on stage.
No, I do perform stand-up comedy, but I'm not good enough for the Comedy Bunker.
Who's coming up in April?
My first one that I'm taking over, the headliners are Raymond and Mr. Timkins, or they're sometimes called the Raymond and Mr. Timkins Review. They're a very silly pair of comedians. They've been around for years and years. I'm sure I saw them when I was just a punter years ago. So they're the headliners. They do an act which is... I think they're acting to music, essentially. The opener is a chap called Finn Taylor, who's been on Live at the Apollo, and a lot of our people have been at Live at the Apollo. The middle is a chap called Richard Todd. And what I've been doing since I've taken over, Phil's given me a fantastic list of names and phone numbers of really well-known big-name comedians. But because I do comedy myself, I have a lot of friends who are what you might call middles. They're people that are on the way up.
Yeah.
And so Richard Todd is one of those people. He's going to be big. He's very quirky and funny and lovely. And so I've booked him to do the middle.
It goes second and fourth Friday of the month, basically, isn't it?
Generally, yes. There is one Thursday. I think the 5th of May, I think, is a Thursday.
Yeah. So your background is actually teaching, you were saying. I bet there's a few comedy stories from there that you probably can't discuss.
Yes, absolutely. I worked for 10 years for Hillingdon Council for the pupil support team, teaching children who weren't in school. And most of the time it was great. I really liked working one-to-one because I found it easier to strike up a relationship with one child rather than a whole classroom.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of incidents that were pretty frightening. But in 10 or 11 years of doing it, there were only 2 occasions when I felt I was in danger.
That's good.
As you say, I can't discuss it.
I was wondering about chatting to you about comedy in general. I mean, I noticed recently that even Brunel have a comedy degree now. You can study comedy at university, but have you any idea what makes jokes funny? It's such a vague question, isn't it?
And I can't give you an answer. And also, it's very difficult to find a joke that makes everybody laugh.
Yes.
You know, they often have polls for the best comedy shows, and generally 40 Towers comes out as the winner. But as for a joke, one joke won't make everybody laugh. It really won't. And it's very subjective.
And I suppose 40 Towers is visual, isn't it, as well? The comedy is visual.
Yes, it's very well written. They took a lot of trouble to write it. They worked very hard, and they only did 12 episodes, 2 series, yeah.
We all know that, of course, laughter is a good healer, isn't it? You go to a comedy club and you come out feeling de-stressed, as long as it's been funny.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, it should be prescribed from doctors.
Yeah, you're talking about that phrase, laughter is the best medicine. As a general rule, if you laugh, it does help you forget about what the bad things. Some people might think that when the country's in a terrible state, it's quite trivial and thoughtless to go into a comedy night, but at the same time, you might want just to forget about things for a bit.
Definitely, yeah. And I'm convinced that comedy clubs have some kind of scanner device over the exit, because when I leave a comedy club, I can never remember any of the jokes. I mean, often jokes are stories. They're not often one-liners that you can remember, but is there a reason why we can't remember jokes when we come out of a comedy club? Or am I just getting old?
I think you come out enjoying the experience. If a particular comedian tells a joke, it might not work if you told it. The way that you tell a joke, as Frank Carson used to say, it is important. It's important. And timing's very important. I don't come out of a comedy club trying to remember any of the jokes. I suppose spend a lot of our time trying to remember my set. I perform stand-up on roughly twice a week. At the moment, I'm only doing 10 minutes because I'm getting back into it post-pandemic. I have to remind myself all the time. I couldn't possibly remember other people's jokes as well. That would really confuse me.
So how do you write your own set? I mean, is it observational comedy? You look around and think that's funny, or?
Yes, I mean, everyone's different. And some people I know don't even write anything down. They just have ideas, mostly the young men.
Yeah.
I went on a comedy course, which was quite useful. But I find if I sit down and try and write, it doesn't work. So generally, I'm doing X or Y, and I'll get a funny idea. It often happens during my exercise class. But sometimes I get quite bored once I've learnt the dance routine. So my mind wanders off, and I start thinking of funny things, and I write them down when I get home. I very rarely sit down and write.
Yeah.
It's usually something that strikes me. I'm quite a quirky person anyway, so I get weird ideas.
Probably there's a time and a place for comedy, isn't there? I think some shopping centres have tried to do comedy and people are passing by. They're not really there to see comedy. It doesn't work so well. But do you think there's a good place and a bad place to have comedy events?
Well, the good place is a designated comedy club, or if it's in a pub, it has to be in a separate room.
Yeah.
And a bad place is, for instance, trying to do comedy, which I have done many times, in a pub where there are people watching television, dogs running by, or being next to the toilets. That's happened as well.
Right.
I've done some horrific gigs.
What about hecklers in comedy? I mean, people that come and pay for a comedy night, it seems weird that they would then try and mess it up by shouting, but there are people that do seem to.
Yes, it is strange. There is an etiquette attached to a comedy night, and some people aren't aware of it. For instance, if a comedian addresses a comment to you, you're not really expected to get in a conversation with them, but some people actually think that you want them to have a conversation. It'll put them off their stride. But the hecklers, they think they're funnier than the comedian, and generally they're not. However, every so often a heckler will say something really, really funny, and if you're an experienced comedian, you go with it and you make the most of it.
And also, I never sit in the front row comedy show. You always think you're going to get picked on. Mm-hmm. So the people that do sit in the front row, do you think they expect to be pointed out during the set?
I think if you sit in the front row, the chances are you will get picked on.
Yeah.
Weirdly, when I'm a punter, when I'm watching, I can't bear the thought of being picked on. I hate it.
So I've just picked out some jokes from the Edinburgh Fringe last year. These are apparently the top 10 jokes.
Yeah.
Now, number one, obviously I'm not a comedian, but if I read it, I thought the word caesarean began with the letter S, but looking in the dictionary, it was in the C section. Why is that funny, do you think?
Well, it's clever. You can be clever without being funny. It's multi-layered, isn't it? Because when I looked at the dictionary, it was in the C section because it begins with C, but also people call it caesarean a C-section. It's very clever. It is funny.
It's wordplay, that one, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes, I don't know why. I don't know why it's funny, but it is. It's funny and it's clever.
Yeah. And number two is a very short joke. My therapist told me a problem shared is 100 quid. And that to me is almost on the border of being too short.
No, I don't think you can have a joke that's too short. He's got the point across immediately, and it's true. You see, it's absolutely true.
And then there's a pun. Number 4 is from Adele Cliff, who I think you probably know.
Yes.
The Roman emperor's wife hates playing hide and seek because wherever she goes, Julius Caesar.
Yes.
It's a pun.
Yes,
joke.
Also clever. Interesting. It's both about Caesar, but a different Caesar joke.
Yeah.
Yes.
They get worse as they go down, by the way.
Oh, because they're the top 10. Yes. Look, there's another caesarean joke as well. How strange. That's very common.
Oh, yes. Number 6 is getting a caesarean is dangerous in Russia. If they open you up and find a little girl, they open up her to see if there's another. Yeah. Number 8. I think Chewbacca is French because he understands English but refuses to speak it. And I like number 9. I don't know what you call a small spillage from a pen, but I have an inkling.
Yes.
I'm glad you popped in and updated us on the Comedy Bunker. I shall definitely go and see a few of these upcoming gigs.
Please do.
Anybody who hasn't been for a while, it's not now the West Ruislip Golf Club because there's a train line being put through it. It is now Uxbridge Golf Club, which is Harefield Road, and then do a left down some dark country lane.
The Drive. It's called The Drive.
Yeah. Very close to Swakeleys roundabout off the A40. So if you're coming by car, aim for the Swakeleys roundabout and you'll get there. Right. And we'll try and keep in touch, Sian, about what's coming up.
Absolutely.
Perhaps you can pop in or whatever. Let us know what's going on.
Yep.
But for now, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve.
And the website is comedybunker.co.uk. Now, as Easter's coming up, I thought we might grab a vicar and find out more about what Lent is all about.
It's great to be joined today by Andrew Studdart Kennedy, who's vicar at St Andrew's Church in Uxbridge. Hello there.
Hello, it's very nice to be here indeed in your studio.
Can you remind us what Lent is all about?
Certainly. I mean, Lent is a period of time leading up to Easter. It marks the days that Jesus himself spent in the wilderness, 40 days and 40 nights. In fact, Lent lasts slightly longer than that because the 40 days and 40 nights do not include Sundays. So by the time you get to Easter Day, it's actually a bit more than 40 days, more like 46 or 47. As I say, it marks the time when Jesus was in the wilderness, and historically it was used also by the early church as a period of preparation for those who were to be baptized into the church community at Easter, because in those days that was the only time of the year when you could be baptized.
Lent is a great time, you think, to perhaps simplify your life and think about slowing things down a little bit?
I think that's right. I mean, even if you are not a person of faith, there is a great merit in changing the rhythm of life so that we mark different seasons and we don't always carry it on at the same pace, something to break up the rhythm and to help us see things in a slightly different way. And certainly, I think there's a great need for a simplification of life, whether that is by consuming less or actually sometimes doing less, because I think one of the things that we find very difficult is the sheer busyness of life, and perhaps it's an opportunity to slow things down, to do one less thing each week sort of thing. So I think it's a value for all people, actually, not just people of faith.
I'm all for doing less. Definitely.
Exactly, yeah, why not? Yeah.
Now, you're a big fan of poetry. I didn't know this.
I am indeed, yes.
And you brought in a couple of poems that talk about Lent.
I have, yes. I think what a good poem does, it gives words to things which, in a sort of strange way, we probably know already, but it confirms my suspicion, and as it were, I have an inkling that this might be the case, and a good poem tells me what I sort of secretly knew all along. That's what I really like about it. So it's about sort of a recognition of what is already there. So I think that is how the best poems work.
And what's the first one you've got for us today?
The first one is a poem just simply called Lent, written by a contemporary poet about whom actually I know very little, called Jean Watt. So it's called Lent, and I'll read it and just make a comment, if I may, just at the end of it, but I hope it's reasonably self-explanatory. Lent by Jean Watt. Lent is a tree without blossom, without leaf, barer than blackthorn in its winter sleep, all unadorned. Unlike Christmas, which decrees the setting up, the dressing up of trees, Lent is a taking down, a stripping bare, a starkness after all has been withdrawn, of surplus and superfluous, leaving no hiding place, only an emptiness between black branches, a most precious space, before the leaf, before the time of flowers, lest we should see only the leaf, the flower, lest we should miss the stars. It's the sense there that the beauty of bare branches, if you like, and how you can see through them and beyond them. Foliage, the leaves on trees and flowers are wonderful. Thank goodness we have them when the time comes. But the simplicity and spareness of bare trees does allow us to see the sky. So this is a poem about keeping perspective, making sure we keep our eyes on the big picture and don't just get focused too much on what is immediately in front of us.
And the second poem you've got?
This second poem is written by somebody called Malcolm Guite, who is a vicar and a don at Cambridge College, chaplain at one of the Cambridge colleges. And this one is called Ash Wednesday. The background to it is the need to be aware that Christians on Ash Wednesday, in some churches, the tradition is to receive the sign of ash made on the sign of the cross, made on our foreheads. And the ash itself is made by the burning of last year's palm crosses. A palm cross is given to churchgoers on Palm Sunday, the Sunday before Easter, and that marks Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And we have a palm cross to remember that, and we have it hold it as it were, throughout Holy Week. But then what happens is that we burn the palm crosses, and from that we make ash. And the ash, of course, is then imposed, as it were, and put on our foreheads. And the words say, "Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Turn away from sin and be faithful to Christ." It's a reminder of our mortality, that we are all born to die. And as a society, we spend a great deal of time trying to avoid thinking about that fundamental truth of the human condition. But like the other poem, this one too is about a simplification, if you like. And one of the things that the author of the poem suggests sometimes is that he thinks on Ash Wednesday that people should dress in the simplest or perhaps the most sort of scrappy clothes they can find, as a reminder of the fact that we can spend far too much time and money and energy on extravagant clothes, and underneath, of course, we are destined to become dust we are, and to dust we shall return. It's about simplification. It's also a poem which is about the need to acknowledge the faults we make at times. Ash Wednesday by Malcolm Guite. Receive this cross of ash upon your brow, brought from the burning of Palm Sunday's cross. The forests of the world are burning now, and you make late repentance for the loss. But all the trees of God would clap their hands, the very stones themselves would shout and sing, if you could covenant to love these lands and recognize in Christ their Lord and King. He sees the slow destruction of those trees. He weeps to see the ancient places burn. And still you make what purchases you please, and still to dust and ashes you return. But hope could rise from ashes even now, beginning with this sign upon your brow. What I like about that is that it captures the sense that even something like ash can be creative. And so the burning of ash, the ash from burnt trees, can be used as a fertilizer. It's part of the paradox that out of death comes life. And that's another thing which I think, again, is in a way we know in our own experience in life. And it's certainly the motif, if you like, that runs through Lent and indeed the whole of the Christian faith.
Well, thank you very much, Jean Watt and Malcolm Guite there. And you've got a Lent walk coming up.
It's actually not until Good Friday, so at the very end of Lent, on the 15th of April, when churches together in Uxbridge will be having a walk of witness. We'll start at the Roman Catholic Church, Our Lady of Lourdes, make our way up to outside the Civic Centre, and then stop and then finish outside St Margaret's Church. And we'll stop in a couple of other places as well.
It's nice that you all work as a team, isn't it? There's a lot of churches in Uxbridge for the size of the town, and you all seem to get on very well.
Well, we certainly hope to do so, yes. I mean, I'm sure there are things we could do better together, but we like to work and be as joint a witness as possible. That's very important.
And there's some youth work going on as well, isn't there, which is interesting. Perhaps not so much in lockdown, but is that now relaunching again?
It is indeed. Our parish youth worker, James Wood, has managed to run groups. In fact, throughout lockdown, they met online. They've been able to meet face-to-face for really quite a while now. And I think that has been invaluable for the young people who come along. And it's outstanding for them.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for coming in. And hopefully we can get you back and we'll do some more poetry and maybe some stories of things that go on in the church, maybe humorous stories or interesting stories that teach us something, whatever you think.
We'd be delighted. I'm sure we'll be able to find plenty of stories like that. I mean, church life consists of human beings, and there are always funny stories when human beings gather in numbers.
Definitely, yes. Oh, that's great. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Next on the podcast, we've got a couple of people who've been blessed to receive life-changing surgery at Harefield Hospital. And they're part of a new scheme to help tell patient stories using sound recordings and video. We mentioned PALS in the chat, which, by the way, stands for Patient Advice and Liaison Service.
We are joined by Pete Laybourne, who is a PALS volunteer at Harefield Hospital. Now, Pete, you've got a story to tell because around about 7 years ago, you had a rather life-changing experience, I understand.
Yeah, it's true. I was unfortunately woke up to be having a heart attack, which was not something that most people want to sort of experience. In my case, it was pretty dramatic on two fronts. If it wasn't for my partner at the time and the subsequent ambulance crew, I probably wouldn't be here. But I was rushed to Harefield Hospital. They performed immediate surgery, put a very large stent into my heart and saved my life. Otherwise, I would have not been here able to talk to you some 7-8 years later.
Wow, so a pretty impressive story about Harefield saving someone's life, which is what they do every day. I mean, it's pretty blasé, but that's what they do every day. And what's your background, by the way?
Prior to that, I was chief executive of an international research and marketing consultancy doing surveys around the world. So consequently, my whole life was spent doing focus groups, if you like, and doing depth interviews with people, trying to find out their buying behaviour for some of the world's leading brands and obviously helping develop strategies in that regard.
Ah, so you thought, right, I'm going to try and give something back to Harefield Hospital and use my experience in marketing and surveys and getting feedback from customers to try and find out more deep patient feedback. How had they been doing patient feedback previously?
Mostly done by sort of surveys, I think, that were run via the patient experience team. They obviously do a lot of research. My first exposure to them was one of the research nurses who actually interviewed me when I was a patient and asking about my experience. They do massive surveys and they spend a lot of time. My experience was much more a case of initially I wanted to give something back to the hospital that saved my life because I thought I owed them something. So I did the PALS thing, as you said. And it was only then that my marketing experience came to light and I was sort of asked to get involved in a number of communications initiatives which they were running. The storytelling element of it came about with trying to understand patient experience from a qualitative point of view, get a better in-depth understanding of the good, the bad and the ugly, if you like. It's not just about getting positive stories, although most of them tend to be positive from a Harefield perspective because it's about life-saving situations. But it was about really trying to get a depth understanding of the journey that patients go on from the minute they sort of are admitted into the hospital and the experiences they have in that hospital environment, that journey that patients go on, which is quite emotive, as you probably understand, because quite often it relates to sort of life and death scenarios. And more often than not, thankfully, it's more about life.
So rather than using forms, you've got a rather more innovative way of collecting this patient feedback and you're recording audio stories. So how does that work?
It's complicated really in some respects because ultimately you can't just hand a recorder to somebody. We've created a training program and I use storytelling in my career as a means of understanding consumer behaviour. So it's no different. If you like, the patient is the consumer and trying to understand their understanding of that experience. You know, you can't just let people loose on wards with recorders. We've gone through a very constructed and structured training program, having recruited past patients like myself, and it's now been running for about 2 years. And we've now got a team of about 8 ex-patients who are involved not just at Harefield, but also at the Royal Brompton up in Chelsea. And the team now are sort of all ready to go, if you like, trying to help people understand the best way of eliciting stories from patients.
How do you extract the data from the stories? I mean, I guess someone has to listen through them all and then pull out snippets from them.
Well, I mean, the key thing about any story is that it's not the length of it. It's trying to get the best part of a 3 to 5 minute soundbite, no more than that. Then edit it down into something which obviously is meaningful to the hospital, but doesn't dilute from the power of the story told by the patient in the first place.
So I suppose it could be a wide variety of feedback. You might have someone saying the food was good, the pillows on the bed were a bit soft, the noise in the ward was too much, through to emotional feedback, and then technical feedback, I suppose, about their operations and their procedures.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you've got to be sensitive to things like that, particularly the latter point, because again, it is highly emotive. More often than not, people actually open up about where they've been, what they're doing, concerns in many instances about what happens when I go home. So it's not just the physical you're having to manage, it's the emotional sort of side of things, which is significant in some instances, I'm sure. Obviously, there are consents with all sorts of things, with GDPR and all that sort of stuff, which we have to go through in accordance of data protection. So obviously, patients have to give their consent to take part in the first place.
It does make you realise how important volunteers are to hospitals, doesn't it, and the working of them.
I think, yeah, the people that you meet, and I've met quite obviously a lot of people who volunteered, and I think they're sort of, I wouldn't say unsung heroes or not, they are important because it allows the PALS side of stuff, and that is about active listening, which is really what became the initiative behind doing it in the first place, because all I was doing was sitting listening to people's stories when I was doing patient visiting at bedside, where I was just chatting to people. It's allowing them to say the things that they won't have time to speak to the doctors or nurses about. And also, most often, if anybody's been in hospital, they realise that, you know, when the doctors come round, they don't often get all the questions out that they want to ask them. Volunteers are important on all levels because every hospital needs them. They are part of the oil in the engine which helps the hospitals which we all enjoy work, I think.
Pete Laybourne there, who helped set up the digital storytelling scheme. Now let's chat to one of the team who's been making some recordings. Here's Charlie Churchill.
Well, hi, Steve. It's great to be here.
Now, first of all, tell us how you came to be involved with Harefield Hospital in the first place. A rather, shall we say, serious condition?
Yeah, this goes back a few years to 2018, when after a series of events, I came to the realisation that I wasn't well at all. I mean, to give you an example for those listening at home here, if I was to say walk to the station, a 15-minute routine walk to the station, I would find that I just couldn't do it. And I'd be propping up myself against a lamppost to get some breath.
Yeah.
And as much as you think that, you know, these things just go away, as I thought at the time, the writing was on the wall that something was seriously wrong. So I went to see my GP, and she said to me, "What do you want to do, Charlie?" Because it's always down to the person's decision to decide what should happen. And because it was near Christmas, I said, well, let's watch and wait. It got no better, well, not surprisingly. And so I went back to see her in just after Christmas, and I said, I really want to get to the bottom of this. So the first port of call was a chest x-ray, which said that's perfectly fine. I had some blood tests to test for anemia, and that was perfectly fine. And so she said to me, Charlie, she said, there's only one other place to go, and that's to the chest pain clinic. Okay, that's fine, because I was getting quite emotional at that particular point because I knew that I was facing something really, really serious. I want to live a lot more of my life. I want to enjoy my family more, and I want to see so many more things before my time is done. So when the letter turned up and it said you're invited to go to Harefield Hospital, that's when you get the moment that says, da, 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 and you see the writing on the wall. And I became quite nervous, but also excited because this is going to be the place they're going to get to the bottom of it. And to cut a long story short, they discovered I needed an aortic valve replacement. And there's a little bit inside your heart which spits out the blood at 3 meters a second, and that wasn't doing anything. And also a double bypass. So I was in serious trouble. Now, the good news is that after a long operation and 6 days in Harefield, I came home, and within 6 weeks of that, I was feeling so much better, and I was able to do their cardiac rehab program to get myself fully fit again. And believe you me, I'm fitter now than I was 15 years ago. But the thing is that when you have this moment in your life when you find that you've been saved from something really, really terrible, it was a bit like King Kong being on top of the mountain and the damsel is like reaching for a foothold somewhere, which is what I was having. And when someone lifts you up and puts you back on your feet again, that's when you think, I want to give something back. That's how I got involved with Royal Brompton.
And there's a scheme at the Royal Brompton and Harefield Hospital called the Storytelling Project, which is, how can you explain this project?
Okay, Steve, that's probably the key to our conversation today. Because I think, folks, that we're seeing now that just by telling a story about anything brings a situation to life. Okay, giving feedback on a form, people often feel that kind of gets lost. But when you can tell the story, when you watch the TV or you watch the football reports or anything at all, there's these little clips which tell someone's story of a situation. Now, when it comes to storytelling for Royal Brompton and Harefield, it's really a brief summary of something like a success they've had. Like, for instance, in my situations, I'm absolutely thrilled with the outcome. But there may be other stories which highlight maybe a training situation that the team there can improve on, or there may be a safety and quality issue that needs sort of careful management. But the thing is, all of this feedback brings a situation to life in a way that the written word just can't do anymore.
And you've been trained to use recording software and video editing software to make these stories. And there's a team of you involved in this project as well, which sounds quite exciting.
Well, Steve, I've got to say that when you're put into a situation where you've got to learn new skills and do new things, that can be quite daunting. So if someone says, we're going to learn some software, most people have had an experience of learning some software and thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be terrible. But the thing is that the scheme is hosted by one of the most inspiring people I've ever met, which is Karen Taylor. And we had a series of classes. We learnt it in sessions using various software for making a good audio, because you want the audio to sound fresh and clean, and using pictures and then putting the story together in a digital format of something like 3.5 to 4 minutes each. And over a period of time, I quite enjoyed it actually, because the people were great fun. And I think we find that when there's fun with learning, it then becomes authentic. And so the team now has grown, and we're in the process at the minute of becoming experts, because the more you practice, the luckier you get, the more skilled we become. But it's a great project, and I'm delighted to be part of it.
Of course, everybody likes to watch videos nowadays. You've got YouTube and TikTok and everything. Nobody wants to fill in forms all day about feedback for projects and things, do they? So it's a great medium for giving feedback and showing success stories.
The world has changed, Steve, and how news is reported and things emerge is very, very different to what it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago.
So there's a team of you, and then is the idea that you will interview patients and then get their feedback on their operations and things? I guess once you can get back into wards and visit patients, or will you be doing things via Zoom and patients' homes and things?
Well, I think the way this will move forward in the future will emerge over time, because once upon a time, Steve, you could go in and volunteers will go into hospitals and visit and say hi and all that kind of thing. Well, that's not possible anymore. Also, a patient or a person needs to come forward, having become aware that there is a storytelling project, to say, yes, I would like this to happen. So it's a patient-initiated situation. And believe you me, I know people who have had the genius of Harefield applied to their bodies to transform their lives, who just want to give things back again. And I think a person's natural instinct, when something really wonderful has happened to them, as has happened to me, is to want to give something back again.
It's probably a great way to get feedback with other companies as well, isn't it? I mean, any company could start doing videos and audio feedback. It doesn't have to be via forms or surveys, does it?
Well, no, I think you can take the concept to any walk of life you like. I think what Harefield are doing as far as healthcare is concerned is really cutting edge, to use a cliche. It's certainly pioneering, and it's going to emerge in by the end of this year, if not 2023, just how much more powerful it can become.
Yeah. So the difference now between how you were before the operation and how you are now is probably chalk and cheese, I would imagine.
Well, I'm a different person.
Yeah.
I think anyone who has a life-saving experience changes you. Certainly physically, I'm much healthier than I was. And when you look back, I can remember situations even some years ago where I thought, I'm just getting old.
Yeah.
You know, people do that.
Sounds great that Harefield have a free gym to use for rehabilitation. So they get you back in and do these sessions for rehabilitation, get you fit again.
After my operation, Steve, I had 6 weeks at home, and you kick off by saying, and they give you a schedule that you need to follow. So the first one is, can you walk to the nearest lamppost and back again? I mean, how bizarre is that? But it's true, because you know, you come out, your wound needs to heal, your body is still recovering, you're not sleeping at all well. That's another thing that you just have to overcome just by letting, you know, nature have its way with you. After 6 weeks, I went back to Harefield, and they do the checkup and they scan you and do all sorts of things. And they said to me, Charlie, right, that's good. Okay, you're fine, you know, for now. But what we would like to offer you, because it's the patient's choice, don't forget, to do our cardiac rehab program. And I thought, all right, well, might as well. For me, it was a 20-week process of using a gym that they had actually in the hospital. They had a room there which is kitted out with weights and exercise machines and all the kind of stuff that you would expect in a normal gym. The class is designed for your ability level, because they test you first with a very genius walking test. Steve, I've got to tell you about the walking test. That's a really good one. And then they assess you, and then they put you into a program which is, you know, comfortable for your ability. And what you find is that as you do it, first of all, the warm-up, Steve, gosh, you do a 15-minute warm-up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you see some of these footballers get ready for a football game. Yeah, it's a bit like that, really. And the first time I went, I remember I thought, is this the warm-up? Goodness gracious, I'm just about when I'm sweating and everything else. The physios there, absolute genius, because they monitor you so closely with the weight of the weights that you may be using or the inclination on the machines to build you up and to see you progress. And I'd say to you, Steve, that after the first couple of sessions, I thought, whoa, this is going to be hard. But then you begin to actually enjoy it. It's quite invigorating. And when you notice that you're improving, it's quite infectious, because you think, I want to improve some more. I want to do more. And it worked really, really well.
I guess you then keep up the fitness and try and keep your heart in good order and maybe eat healthily and whatever.
Well, it's all about self-management.
Yeah.
I think really if you've got a chronic condition, there's probably 3 things that you need. One is self-management, you know, doing the right things for yourself, whatever it is. It's having access to trained and qualified healthcare. And the final thing is having peer support. By that, we mean having access to other people in the same boat as you. Mm. Now, the genius and the beauty of the patient storytelling, or anything else that goes on within their PALS service, you know, the patient advisory liaison service, is that it kind of brings all that together, and it gives a real passion for what you're doing. So yes, I'm doing my best in all those areas, because I don't want to lose any of the progress that I've made.
No.
And certainly I want to enhance my later life. Because, to be quite honest, they're great people at Harefield, but I do not really want to spend another 6 days having an operation there again.
No, ideally not. Yeah, I must admit, we hear so many great stories about Harefield, so many success stories, and people who want to help them if they can and give back with the annual run and other ways of raising money, parachute jumps and all sorts of things.
I've got a final thought to leave those listening at home. Thoughts. When I had my fit for surgery assessment before the operation, Harefield were very kind enough to allow one of their surgeons, a consultant surgeon, to talk to me. And he didn't just breeze past. He sat down where I was, pulled up a chair, and he talked to us for an hour. He discussed with me and put me at ease about so many things about the impending operation I was having. But I said to him, can you tell me, please, why is it, after looking after my health and my diet and my exercise for all these years, and also that I have diabetes as well, and I've done my best to manage that successfully and confidently, how come this has happened to me? And he said to me this, Charlie, he said, if you hadn't have been doing all that for all those years, we probably would be having this conversation 15 years ago. and I've lived with that from that moment forward.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thanks for coming in, Charlie, and telling us all about this storytelling project that they're running at the Royal Brompton Hospital. And if we can help at all with anything, just let us know.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's been great to be here.
We've got news from the Colne Valley next. Here's Fiona Brewer, who's project manager at the Colne Valley Landscape Partnership, with a plea.
It's no exaggeration to say the threats against the Colne Valley Regional Park, and indeed the Greenbelt as a whole, have reached crisis point. Development proposals are a fact of life. Some are entirely positive projects that bring obvious benefits, while others most certainly are not. Here at the Colne Valley Regional Park, we have noticed an alarming increase in speculative, commercially driven projects that are completely unsuitable in the Greenbelt. Despite political support for making use of brownfield sites, they are normally post-industrial and need cleaning up before anything can be built on them. That can be expensive, which is why many developers prefer to make a case for building on the Greenbelt instead. There has been a tendency among planners to view proposals as one-offs rather than looking at their cumulative impact on the character of a wider region. This is particularly true of the Colne Valley, which straddles several different local authority areas. The result risks a kind of death by 1,000 cuts. Lots of development proposals ranging from gigantic infrastructure projects like motorway service areas, a theme park, HS2 and Heathrow expansion, to a myriad of smaller but still potentially damaging plans. If these were approved, as many appear to be heading that way, the future will be a wide urbanisation of the Colne Valley Regional Park and its surrounding green areas. This was not why the Greenbelt was established on the edge of London, and was not the intention when the Colne Valley Regional Park was created in 1965. The Colne Valley Regional Park is not anti-development. We are pro-countryside and view the Greenbelt as a positive thing for a better natural environment with recreation opportunities and access to nature to improve physical and mental health for the benefit of millions of people who live nearby. We aim to ensure the park thrives as a place for recreation, agriculture and wildlife, whilst playing its part to combat climate change. At the Colne Valley Park, we will do our best to respond to major development proposals. But this drains our resources and is simply tackling the symptom. If we want to effect a real change, we have to tackle the cause of all these major development proposals springing up in this precious but extremely fragile area of countryside and waterways. We need government and local authorities to refocus attention on the Greenbelt to keep it permanently open, protecting and improving it for the benefit of our communities and wildlife, rather than seeing it as merely a tiresome obstacle to development that must be overcome. The Colne Valley is facing unprecedented pressures and is fighting for its life to maintain its vital role as a high-quality, wildlife-rich, productive and accessible green space for local people. We have sent a briefing note outlining the situation to local MPs and local councils. If you agree that this requires urgent action, please speak to your MP and your local councillors to ask them to act for your local environment and rivers before it's too late. Thank you.
Finally this month, let's catch up with what's happening at the Iver Environment Centre.
First of all, we have a family fun day, and it's called Springing to Life, because it's all about spring and celebrating all the signs of plants and animals coming back to life, learning about life cycles, creating egg-themed crafts, and planting seeds for pollinators. And we also have a paid-for workshop at an extra cost, which will be pond dipping and making clay creatures at their different life stages. So learning about the dragonfly life stages, for example. That's on Monday the 11th of April. And there's a morning session or an afternoon session. On the 12th and 13th of April, we have 2 drop-off days. So they're for children ages 7 to 11. Join us from 10 until 4. We learn about, again, life cycles. We do some pond dipping. We'll be doing campfire cooking as well. And then a bit later on in April, we're doing an Earth Day event for families. That's the Friday the 22nd of April. We'll be learning about sustainability, playing a recycling game, and there'll be a chance to grow your own food in a handmade paper pot as well. And a workshop making a tote bag from old T-shirts. So it's about recycling and reusing and how we can help the earth.
And if people haven't been to the centre perhaps since lockdown, are there any new facilities or new things that you've opened?
Last year we've been renovating the pond. So we've got a brand new pond dipping platform, which is looking lovely. And we've also been growing a wildflower meadow. It's all green now. By the time it comes to summer, hopefully it'll be looking amazing with lots of lovely wildflowers that people will be able to walk through. At the moment, we're fundraising for a new habitat-themed playground as well. If you go onto our website and click on Support Us at the top of the page, there's a lot more information about that, so you can read all about the different play equipment that we're working on, and we set up a GoFundMe for that.
And the website for that is iverenvironmentcentre.org. And that's all for this month. Check out the list of local events on the Uxbridge FM website, uxbridgefm.co.uk. Join us on social media, just search Uxbridge FM. And if you're lucky, your smart speaker should play the podcast. Just ask for the Uxbridge FM podcast. Thanks to Chris Allen for helping out and Luca Nieri for the music. I'll catch you next month.